Hello class. Today we're going to be talking about the trans-theoretical model and just very briefly about the precaution adoption process model, which is just again an extension or expansion of the trans-theoretical model. Before I go into the lecture though, I want to talk a little bit about your literature review assignment and assignments in general. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to not go and look at files or I don't know where you all are getting some copies of these assignments, and I think they might be old versions are available in the list of files. I went and tried to eliminate all of them, all the old ones, and just keep the newer ones, the new ones that I finalized for this class. So I just wanted to make sure that one, that you're looking at the correct assignment requirements is really important. So make sure you go in and look within your learning module and click there on the assignment for instructions. Don't go elsewhere to look for instructions. Also, I would ask that you, I forgot what I was going to say. So don't look at all instructions. Look within the learning, within the modules inside Canvas for the week for those assignments. Don't try to jump ahead to other assignments because you can't really start on an assignment unless you've had the proper readings and lecture and learn sufficiently the materials needed to carry out that assignment. So in this class, it doesn't work to try to jump ahead. It's like, let me get a jump start on that second assignment, even though the first assignment's not due yet, right? And so I think you're going to end up with doing a lot of wasted work because the official assignment is not yet released. Okay, so just be patient. Work on the current assignment, which is the Lit Review assignment. Go back into the learning module from last week, which is where the assignment first appears. Click, read the instructions really carefully. And so what is happening is, I think, a little bit of failure to read the instructions very carefully. And so that, I think people skim the instructions and then go and try to do part of the assignment, but then extrapolate or go off on a different tangent. It's like I ask that you first read through the assignment, create an outline of everything you need to complete that assignment with the specific details for each component of your assignment. That'll help keep you on track as to, am I looking for the right thing? Am I covering the right points in my assignment, right? So that outline will be kind of like your checklist. Am I doing this correctly? And so this first assignment, I think several students asked me, can I review their assignment before they submit it? And I cannot possibly do that. It would take me night and day to be reviewing assignments every single time an assignment was due if I were to review for every student. There's just too many students in my classes right now, and I cannot offer that. But also your assignments are a sort of a test of professional skills. One, can I read and understand the instructions? And if you can't, that's on me. You can send me questions like, I don't understand this part, or I'm not quite sure I get this part. Those questions, send them my way, okay? Because I may not always explain things as clearly as I would think I am. But two, it's like, do your part and make sure you're reading very carefully, okay? So you need to, as a student at a graduate level, need to learn to follow instructions very carefully. So I would say spend a good amount of time reading the requirements of the assignment that is due right now or coming up, right? The one that's active right now. Read through, develop an outline, Part of this is developing the ability to follow instructions. Well, you'll need to do not only in your classes, but also in the future, right? When you're out in the field, you want to write a grant, well, you need to be able to follow instructions on what grants require, right? What are the requirements? What is it that they're looking for specifically? Am I eligible to apply for this, right? So those are really important details, and it's an important skill to learn to follow instructions. So, so I am looking for that in your assignments as well, okay? But if you do have a question, like explanation in the assignment is not quite clear in some aspect, please send me your questions. I welcome those type of questions. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is, as you're reading, try to focus on all your readings, right? In how they're talking about changing behavior. So in this class, we are focusing on individual level influences of behavior, such as, all the cognitive and behavioral influences that are being described in the theories. We are looking at how the theories impact behavior and how they are applied to different behaviors, different cultures, different populations. So those are the things I really want you to zoom in on when you're conducting your reading. I know there's a lot of discussion about research or statistics and stuff. We will capture that in your next semester on how to use theory in research, right, and how to go about measurement and stuff. Some of you asked really, really good research questions, but I think I don't know if you don't have any questions on the application of the theories, which is really where I want you to be focusing on the theory and how it influences behavior in this class. How do we go about modifying behavior? Okay, and theory is part of that. I mean, research is part of that. It's just that there's too many advanced research questions that would take a long time to answer in this class. So I'm going to reserve those for next semester. But I do acknowledge that they were good questions. And I like that you're being critical in your reading. I really like that, that you're questioning how they're applying these to specific populations in a way that might not be engaging to them. I really enjoy reading your questions, and I try to think about it a lot as I'm trying to prepare the lectures for our classes, okay? All right, so let's start with the theory, the trans-theoretical model, sorry. And so, excuse me. So this model was developed by James Prochaska, pictured here on the left, and Carlo De Clemente. And so they discovered that behavior change unfolds through a series of stages. So it's not like all of a sudden we're engaging in behavior or not. It's like there's steps that occur as a person's progressing toward behavior change. And so at each stage of change, there are different processes going on in our mind. And there's different processes that need to take effect before we can move on to the next stage. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Okay, so here's a little bit of background on the trans-theoretical model. Again, it was originally developed to look at addictive behaviors, particularly smoking. Okay, so smoking is a pretty addictive. Nicotine's very addictive. And it was developed, the model was developed focusing on self-changers. So now people that are so addicted that, their physical addiction to a drug exceeds their ability to change their behavior, right? They're beyond that, and they need some kind of clinical or medical help to help them get past that. But for folks who are still within the ability to initiate change, right? There's still some volitional ability there. That's what this theory was focusing on in terms of substance use. So in more modern days, the theory is now being used to look at the acquisition of new healthy lifestyles. Okay, so how do we promote physical activity with a trans-theoretical model, or how do we improve diet, right? So now we're kind of moving away from those risk behaviors like engaging in substance use, and now moving toward promoting healthy lifestyle. So I know someone in a few people in the class asked about, people with addictive disorders, wouldn't they benefit more from clinical type of interventions? Like, why are they trying to target addictive behaviors that really require some kind of clinical intervention? And I thought that was a pretty valid question, but there's several reasons, potential reasons for this. And one is that some people do turn it around, right? Even though they have addictions to, say, alcohol or nicotine or other drugs, and through social support or other strategies, they manage to turn it around. And it doesn't mean that they do it completely on their own, but it's through different resources in their community that perhaps they're able to turn it around without engaging in clinical services. And so that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is that not everybody has access to clinical services, right? A lot of people do not have insurance to cover such services. Sometimes insurance, even if you have it, doesn't cover these type of services as fully, right? So there's still a huge cost to the individual. And I was going to say one more thing regarding that. Oh, the other thing is that maybe not everybody's inclined to participate in clinical services. So many cultures or racial ethnic groups might have certain aversion to engaging in mental health services of any sort, even for substance use, because there's a little bit of taboo around that topic. So in a way, it's good that we try to engage to some extent, but realizing that very severe addictions might be a little bit difficult to initiate with these types of interventions. So just a little bit of something there. All right, let's go on. Okay, so why do they call the model trans-theoretical? Well, for one thing, it integrates processes and principles of change from across major intervention theories. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about just different processes of change that we're going to cover a little bit later in the lecture. Okay, and also cover self-efficacy and other constructs other than the stages of change. We also know that they also refer to it as trans-theoretical because of the stages of change, which can be integrated across and in combination with behavioral theories, such as like you could combine the trans-theoretical model with the theory of planned behavior. Okay, so you could examine things like, well, how do attitudes change or encourage movement from not thinking about practicing health behavior to, transitioning to actually thinking about it? How do we move people? If we influence attitudes, does that change or move people from a pre-contemplation stage to a contemplation state? Okay. Okay, so the definition of the trans-theoretical model is an integrative framework for understanding how individuals and populations progress toward adopting and actually maintaining health behaviors in order to promote optimal health. Okay? So the trans-theoretical model includes, it includes two major components, but actually more than what we list here as the two major components. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, or maybe in the next lecture. But the two major components discussed are the stages of change, which just basically defines how ready a person is to engage in a specific desired or to stop an undesired behavior. And then the processes of change, which are those processes that have to occur in the individual in order to transition them from one phase or one stage to a later stage, a more advanced stage toward the desired behavior change. So let's start with the stages of change. And so here we have certain assumptions. And one is that all successful behavior change happens along 6 predictable stages. Okay? And change is not a process. Change is a process, not an event. So think of it, change as a process, and that's why we have all these different stages where we're moving toward behavior change. So the 6 stages listed in the stages of change model include pre-contemplation, which refers to no intention to take action within 6 months. Okay? Person's not even thinking about changing. The second stage is contemplation. And in this stage, in this mindset, the individual is thinking of taking action, but is not quite sure about it yet, and they're still deliberating it. But there's some intention to take action in the next 6 months. Okay. Then we have the preparation stage, where the individual intends to take action. So now they're preparing to take action. It's usually take action within the next 30 days. And there's already some movement, some preparation, right? Some strategies toward the behavior change. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The fourth stage is the action stage. And basically the person has started engaging in the behavior change. And typically this is still in the early stages of change in the first 6 months of behavior change, okay, from the initiation of the change. And then there's maintenance. It's a very desirable stage where change has been overt. Behavioral change has been overt for about 6 months or more. And then there's termination, where there's like, okay, you're there. It's like no more temptation to relapse. There's 100% confidence of being able to carry out the behavior. Okay. Some folks list the 7th stage. So here we have the 6 stages. Some folks list the 7th stage defined as relapse. So that basically people can relapse to an earlier stage. Okay. And so, so these are the different stages of readiness to change. It's an indicator of motivation to change, if you will. And we know that depending what stage an individual is in for changing a specific behavior, remember we're always focusing the theory or the model toward a very specific behavior. And so we know that the behaviors, the health messages are more effective when it's targeted at a specific person's stage of readiness to change. Okay, so someone in the pre-contemplation stage might get a different type of intervention or message than someone who's in the preparation stage. And so that's what they called a theory, a TTM, or a trans-theoretical model tailored intervention, because the intervention is tailored, right? It's tailored for the particular stage the person is in, right? So we want to make sure that the theory is being applied in such a way that we can tailor the intervention according to the recommendations of the theory. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. So let's go in through each of the stages of change. So we're revisiting pre-contemplation. In this stage, the person is not thinking about change, no intention to change, typically for a period of time. So in this case, they listed as the past 6 months. A person's unwillingness to change or not think about change may be related to different conditions or experiences of theirs. And so one condition might be that they're just unaware that the behavior is not good for their health. It's bad for their health. They might just lack awareness that there's a link between the behaviors they're engaging and health outcomes. That's a possibility. And so we talk about applying the stages of change to children. And people question, like, are children, do they have the capacity to be aware of the relationship between behavior and health outcomes, right? These long-term relationships. Can children capture those associations and find them meaningful enough that it might influence their behavior? Now that's something to think about, right? That's something that the research that you've been reading about this week kind of brings into question. The other thing, other conditions that might influence whether a person is in the pre-contemplation stage is their lack of motivation or their wanting or motivation to avoid the issue, right? They might also be demoralized because they've tried and tried and tried to change the behavior, and it was not effective. Either they were not able to achieve the behavior change, or they engaged in the behavior change, but it did not lead to the desired behavioral outcome. So perhaps you might think of someone who's overweight or obese, and they are engaging, they're motivated, right, initially to engage in the behavior to the point that they've gone into the action and even tried to maintain that behavior for a while, but they may not be seeing changes in health outcome or changes in the weight loss. And so they might get so frustrated that they just give up. Like, I've tried and tried to exercise, and no matter how hard I exercise, I'm not able to lose the weight, right? Because many factors influence weight gain. And so so they become demoralized and kind of experience like a learned helplessness that they have no other choice but just to give up. Okay. So I want to raise the question of what is the proposed way to use the stages of change? Whom should we target in our efforts to improve health and to modify behavior change? So think carefully at each of the stages. I want to raise that question right now. So as we're thinking about the stages of change, and some people, some folks in their questions, their weekly questions kind of suggested, like, why would you bother with someone in the pre-contemplation stage? Why would you? Why wouldn't you work with those people that are really trying already, who are working and maybe need support to get them into maintenance and termination, right? It's like, why wouldn't you allocate your efforts to those folks? And so I want you to think about, why shouldn't we be ignoring these pre-contemplators? Why wouldn't we try to help folks who are in the pre-contemplation state, people who are not even thinking about changing their behavior? Why? Will it be wasted effort? Are there things we can do to move a person from pre-contemplation to more advanced stages? I think there is, right? You should have learned some of those things in this book. And it might be extra work to work with these people in the pre-contemplation stage. But one reason we should not ignore the pre-contemplators is because this group, the group of pre-contemplators, are more likely to consist of people who are poor or have low socioeconomic status, people who come from minority racial ethnic groups. And so that's a huge part of the population experiencing health disparities, right? It's like we don't want to ignore these people. We need to get them up and move them toward healthy behaviors or healthy lifestyles and reduction of risk behaviors. Okay. So in a way, if you ignored the pre-contemplators, you would be ignoring those people who probably need help the most. Okay. So we don't want to ignore the pre-contemplators. We want to make sure that we work with them, but in the way that's prescribed, to tailor our messages for pre-contemplators to get them moving and motivated toward behavior change. Okie dokie. All right, next stage is the contemplation stage. And so here the individual is aware of the issue problem, has started thinking about changing sometime in the near future, maybe in the next 6 months. Still weighing the pros and cons of changing, still struggling with how to change. So there might be some decisional imbalance or in an unfavorable way, right? The decisional balance of costs and benefits is discussed quite a bit in the textbook. And so some people get stuck in this state of ambivalence between the pros and cons of engaging in the behavior. Some are called chronic contemplators, okay, or procrastinators toward behavior change. So they're thinking about change, but there's no significant commitment to change or to take action quite yet. Okay, so there's some action-oriented programs that we would probably try to engage someone who's already in the planning stage or in the action phase, but they probably would not be very effective with the contemplation stage. So again, you have to go back and look at the recommendations. What type of interventions should we engage in with someone who's a contemplator or even a chronic contemplator? Okay, so we'll come back to that. Some of you asked, like, what do we do with chronic contemplators? Okay. All right, so the next stage is the preparation stage. So this is the stage where people are actually planning, intending to make change in the near future, typically within in the near future, right? In the very near future, like I want to start this. So this decision to engage in the behavior change has been made, and now the person's preparing, making a plan of how they're going to engage in the behavior change and stick to it. So maybe they are wanting to start exercising, so they're going to set a date to start exercising. I do this every Sunday, and then I go back to my contemplation stage. So the person might set a date to start their behavior change, and then they might do something like join a gym or buy some equipment to help them engage in healthier behavior or physical activity. That's the example in this particular case. They obtain the tools needed. So again, they buy exercise equipment gear. They might learn new skills. So people might not feel comfortable or feel that it's safe to engage without someone telling them exactly what to do. So maybe they sign up for a class. And also they feel like, oh, I'll get the social support from my class, right, as well. Or, so they try to acquire some sort of support for their behavior change. And so these people who are in the preparation stage are appropriate for recruitment to an action-oriented program. Okay. And so these people typically have had prior unsuccessful attempts, but now they're making an action plan to see if they can be successful this time around. Okay, now it's the action stage. So now, person in the action stage has already been engaging in some of the desired behavior or the new behavior. They've been doing this for less than 6 months. To be considered action. So this is typically an exam question, right? To be considered action, the behavior must meet the criterion that the level of activity or behavior that will reduce risk for disease. So if we engage in colorectal cancer screening, does that meet a criterion of something that might help reduce the risk for disease? If I reduce my smoking by 3 packs a month, is that sufficient? Does that meet the criterion for reducing the risk for disease? So that becomes kind of a blurry line. You can see how that might change a little bit. But in some cases, it's really obvious, right? It's like there has to be enough activity to promote some kind of positive health outcome. Okay, the plan. So in the action stage, the plan has put into motion. So they're modifying behavior, modify the experience and the environment for a short defined period. And they are trying typically to target a very specific problem. And so, for example, one time I was going to go up for surgery, and I knew that I was not in the best shape. And so before my surgery, I wanted to get fit. So I knew my surgery was like 2 months away. And so I started eating a lot healthier and exercising to make sure my body would be in good condition to withstand a surgery, right? A big invasive surgery. And it affects the way you heal if you're not in good shape. And so I was aware of that, and I wanted to make sure that I was in good shape. Okay, so you can see that there's a very, typically a very specific problem that one is targeting. Or perhaps I'm just trying to lose 5 pounds, and I'm going to engage in behavior. I'm going to take some action to get myself down to lose those 5 pounds. Okay, then there's the final, the stage where we call maintenance, where the person continues to work to maintain the behavior change. They work to prevent relapse to old behaviors. They're much more confident about being able to engage in the desired behavior. And the behavior is becoming more of a habit when they're in maintenance. There's less application of the different change processes that we're going to talk about in a little bit. There's less temptation to resort to old habits. And to keep, there's less temptation to steer the person away from the desired behavior. And the change in behavior has lasted 6 months or longer at this point to be considered that the person is in the maintenance stage. Okay, so the person must have been engaging in the behavior 6 months or more. Okay, and then there's the termination stage. So at this point, there's zero temptation. They describe zero temptation usually in relationship to addictive behaviors, right? So zero temptation to pick up a smoke or to drink alcohol or whatever the addictive behavior. The person in the termination stage has become a non-smoker. The definition of someone in the termination stage is typically someone that has been engaging in the desired behavior for 5 years or more. Okay. And this is because this 5-year criterion is important, particularly for addictive behaviors. So the science shows that the risk of smoking relapse will drop significantly after a person has engaged in 5 years of abstinence. Okay, so it's only about a 7% risk of relapse. There's 100% confidence that the person can engage in the desired behavior or eliminate a undesirable behavior. The new behavior is more habitual, automatic for the person. It's the ideal goal for the individual. In this stage, it's as if the old habit never existed, right? The unhealthy habit never existed. Okay. So let's look at relapse and the stages of change. So going through the stages is not a linear process. So you don't go just, from being a pre-contemplator to a contemplator and there's no point of return. And then you just go down to the next preparation stage and then to action. Once you're in action, there's no turning back to a previous stage. That's not true, right? There's lots of opportunity for relapse. We know that. Anybody who's tried to prevent engaging in a certain behavior or to start a new healthy behavior knows that there is that opportunity for relapse. And one can recycle through the stages over and over again, right? I might go back to my pre-contemplation stage and stay there for a bit and then start moving back toward preparation and action. Okay. Okay, so some of you did ask about how would you assess the different stages of change and how is this done? Well, it's self-report, right? Because we're trying to assess a person's motivation to change their behavior. And so you do have to ask them, right? It's not something we can observe. And so typically the stages of change are each measured with a series of questions, like 3 to 5 questions to assess the pre-contemplation stage and similar amount of questions for each of the subsequent stages. Okay, so here I'm going to give you an example of different questions, and I want you to think, what would that question assess? What stage is the item trying to assess? So the first one is, I'm trying to drink less than I used to. So I'm engaging in behavior. I'm only, I used to drink every day. Now I'm drinking only on the weekends. So what stage would that be? Is it pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance? Which one? If you said action, you're right? It's like, okay, I'm trying to drink less than I used to. I know I didn't put a time frame on it, but I'm like still trying. You can see that it's still not quite there, right? The next question. I enjoy my drinking, but sometimes I drink too much. And so this person acknowledges there's a problem. They're thinking about it, right? They're acknowledging they drink too much, probably thinking about it, but they're still enjoying their drinking. So this person would be considered to be in the contemplation phase. Okay, the third one. I have been alcohol for 1 year now. Alcohol free for 1 year. What stage is that? Okay. So if you guessed maintenance, you guessed right? It's like the person has been engaging in the behavior for more than 6 months. That's maintenance. I am planning on drinking less starting next week. Okay, so I'm making a plan now. So clearly that is the preparation stage, right? I'm making a plan. I'm going to stop drinking next week, or at least reduce my drinking next week. And then finally, the last one, my life would still be the same even if I drank less. Like, so this person is not even thinking of changing, right? It's like, that's the pre-contemplator. Okay, so just a little example. I'm going to post a survey related to the stages of change assessment of drinking behavior, just for you to review and just to see what the questions might look like in the survey. Okay. Oh, and these type of items would typically be measured like on a 5 or 7 point Likert scale. So strongly disagree, ranging all the way to strongly agree. And you would just rate it, the statement, to the extent to which you agree. Okay, so what are three reasons for using the stages of change? Well, first, it provides a way to group people and compare these groups in terms of factors that affect their behavior. So you can group those people who are the pre-contemplators. If you give them your survey, you can say, okay, this person is in the pre-contemplation stage. This person is in, maybe in the preparation stage. So you can kind of group people, right? And then decide what kind of messages, what kind of tailored messages do I need to provide them with. Okay, a second reason is that you can use it as an outcome, as a study outcome, by examining how people are progressing between the stages following some kind of intervention. Okay, so progression between stages can be used as a research outcome rather than relying exclusively on behavioral outcomes. And so sometimes we'll, say we were engaging in trying to change somebody's physical activity, right? And the only thing we had to use as an outcome was their actual behavior. And so in a study where you had, all these people, you learned that the majority don't actually make it to increasing their behavior change. Like when you measured the actual behavior, you saw no change. And so you would say, my intervention was not effective in motivating behavior change. But again, behavior change is a process, right? So we would want to use this as a tool to see it like, did we at least move people from the pre-contemplation stage to, say, a preparation stage? So maybe they didn't engage in the behavior, but they are already starting to plan and program themselves to engage in the behavior in the near future. That's an accomplishment, right? The person was originally in the pre-contemplation stage, and now they're in the preparation stage. So that's good. And maybe they require additional intervention. But again, many of our studies have limited financial resources. We are working with community members who might allow us to conduct some research with them over a fixed time frame. What we learned from that study, we can't really continue to follow these people past what we originally agreed in our consent form with them, right? We also have to commit to only measuring for a specific amount of time that we defined in our grant applications. And so when you follow people over time, it costs a lot of money. And so that's why you see a lot of studies that perhaps are looking more at the cognitive factors that people can report through a survey versus actual behavioral outcomes. Okay, so progression between stages can be used as a research outcome in a study, especially when you're applying some kind of intervention. And then finally, change is not continuous. So we know that it's marked by very distinct events or stages that signify progress. So again, it gives us that opportunity not to say a program had some kind of effect, right? They're in the process, or perhaps people are going back and forth. We can learn more about how people cycle in and out of the stages, um, especially if we get to look at them over time. Okay. So your textbook talked about 10 processes of change. And so these processes of change are borrowed or adapted from other theories. Each has a broad strategy that may involve a number of different techniques. Um, the processes of change rely on self-change principles. So these are processes that are used by the changer, the person who's going to commit the behavior change, with or without the help of somebody else. And our job is to help them use the processes to move through the stages. Okay? And so here they are. So the first one is consciousness racing. So what does that mean? Consciousness racing is just finding and learning new facts. So teaching people, right? Educating them, providing them knowledge. So finding and learning new facts, ideas, and tips that support the healthy behavior change. So why should you change? Oh, because if you change your behavior, it'll lead to better health outcomes. It'll prevent mortality. It'll make you feel better physically and mentally, whatever the case, right? So like science has shown that it does this. So you can give people factual information. So for example, you might provide somebody with nutrition education, right? Or a person might go in and searching for information or education on the internet. So you can see like this process of change might occur because someone is intervening and educating the person, but the person might also come across some information on the internet or might actively go look for information, right? So perhaps it might be self-initiated, but it might also be through an intervention. Okay, dramatic relief. Experience the negative emotions such as fear, anxiety, worry that go along with unhealthy behavioral risks. Okay, so perhaps you might bring someone in to give a testimonial about, how engaging in these unhealthy behaviors led to catastrophic outcomes for their health. Okay, so those testimonials kind of come in and say, bring in a revelation, an emotional experience for the individual. So dramatic relief and testimonials is a way to engage the person in some kind of dramatic relief. Self-evaluation is the realizing that the behavior change is an important part of one's identity as a person. So what does that mean? Self-reevaluation. So it helps you clarify what's of value in your life, right? So if you keep doing this, what will be the outcome? Maybe something happened, right, like a negative outcome. And if I continue doing this, more of that is going to continue happening. So there's a reevaluation of one's situation and what's desirable outcomes are. So if I keep doing this, what will be the outcome? And is this outcome something that I want to happen, right? So that's one way to reevaluate. Or one might engage in one's environmental reevaluation. And so here you might realize how your behavior is impacting your environment or others in your environment. So realizing the negative impact of your unhealthy behavior or the positive impact of your healthy behavior on one's social network, right? Proximal social network and one's physical environment, right? So our actions have an effect on our physical environment and our social environment. So becoming aware of that. So What's the impact of my smoking on those around me, on my wife, on my children, on my husband, on my whomever is important and around you, right? So it's a little bit of, requires some kind of empathy training, not just a self-focus, but focusing on other than yourself. And then finally, the last one on here is self-liberation. And this is just making a firm commitment to change. And so these tend to happen or be paired with big events in our lives, such as New Year's Eve, right, is a time for self-liberation. You're going to make that commitment to stop smoking at the beginning of the year. For many Catholics, the Lent time is Lent is a time for changing one's behaviors, right, or to sacrifice. And so they might sacrifice some unhealthy behaviors they engage in. And so at least they'll do so for a short time frame, right, during the Lent season. Okay. So continuing with the processes of change, another one is helping relationships, and this is just seeking out social support, right? Seeking and using social support to help support your behavior change. And so looking for an exercise buddy, joining a gym, making sure your family supports you in your behavior change. If you're trying to change your diet, that's a really hard one, right? When only one person in the family is trying to change their diet, and how are they going to engage in those helping relationships? If they're not going to get it from within their family, they need to find another source of social support to help them do that. Counter-conditioning is another process of change, and this calls for the substitution of healthier alternative behaviors and cognitions to replace those unhealthy behaviors. Okay, so an example of that might be so people using smoking or alcohol to relax in the evenings. It's like, what could be a substitution for smoking or a glass of wine to relax in the evening? Well, my substitute might be engaging in some kind of meditation to help me relax. Engaging in yoga to help me relax, right? To help de-stress. Any kind of relaxation exercise. Okay, reinforcement management. So increasing the rewards for positive behavior, decreasing rewards for unhealthy behavior. So that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. You need some kind of incentive, right, to be there for you for when you're successful in changing your behavior. Stimulus control is also really, really important. It involves removing reminders or cues that promote you to engage in unhealthy behavior, or adding those cues or reminders to help you engage in the healthy behavior. So stimulus control, if you're trying to eat healthy, might mean throwing away all the unhealthy food in your pantry, right? So removing all those cues that engage you, that motivate you to eat unhealthy, and then putting healthy cues in its place, right? So fruits and vegetables, chopped up all nice in little pieces, bite-sized pizzas, so that you can eat them easily and without any trouble, right? So my husband has been cutting up watermelon or fruits and vegetables and having them ready for lunch for us. And that's huge for me because just the thought of preparing something, I know it's lazy, but it's kind of nice to have it already cut up for you and just, okay, it's ready to serve and eat, right? Let's see, what else? So on the other hand, you might add cues or reminders to help you engage in the healthy behaviors. So you might want to, make sure that your shoes and your exercise clothes are there and visible when you wake up first thing in the morning, because that's the only time you can exercise. So my shoes, my exercise clothes are there and ready. My water bottle is there. I prepped it last night, so I already got water in it. and I can get right to it and not waste any time. Okay. And then there's social liberation. And this is just basically a realizing that social norms are changing in the direction of supporting the healthy behavior change. And so for this, we might have something like increases in healthy social opportunities. So more people are now like thinking it's popular to engage in certain healthy behaviors. Maybe your environment is being modified, and it's like, hey, now there's these new walking paths in my neighborhood that help me track how much I'm walking. Or, hey, they put all these new bike trails on our streets to protect bicyclists. And that's kind of really nice. Now I feel like at least there's some kind of designation for where people riding their bikes can do so relatively safely, as long as people are following those guidelines. Okay, so one of the other constructs, we've discussed the stages of change, and we've discussed the processes of change. So now let's transition to another set of constructs in the trans-theoretical model, which includes the decisional balance between pros and cons, right? So we typically weigh the pros and cons of changing our behavior, and sometimes the pros and cons of not changing or maintaining the status quo, right? So we are like, okay, what are the pros of engaging in physical activity? And I can think of several things, right? It might help me lose weight, help me feel better physically and emotional, and other things, right? Help me sleep better at night, help suppress my hunger, all sorts of things, right? There's all sorts of benefits to engaging in physical activity. And then I might think of the cons of changing my behavior. So, it's going to reduce the amount of time I sleep at night, because now I have to get up 1 hour extra early so that I can exercise. I'm going to be sore probably from exercising. I don't like getting all sweaty and yucky. So if I don't exercise in the morning, it's just not going to happen, because once I take a shower, I'm not going to exercise. Or it might be cutting into my time with my family in the morning, whatever, right? You can think of all sorts of cons, all sorts of reasons for not changing your behavior. On the flip side of that, you might think of the cons associated with not changing. What's going to happen if I don't start exercising, right? Well, I might continue to gain weight, right? I might continue to gain weight. I might become ill with some kind of chronic illness. I know that weight gain is associated with all sorts of things like diabetes and cancer. I do feel really sluggish all the time. I don't have good energy levels. And so there's a variety of cons of not changing, right? It's not all pros. There's cons there too. But I can also think of the pros of not changing. Oh, I can get that extra hour sleep, or spend that time with my family instead of like trying to take that time away from them, just so I can exercise for myself. People think all sorts of things in terms of pros and cons. Pros and cons of change, pros and cons of not changing. Okay? So in order to progress from pre-contemplation to later stages of change, the pros of changing must increase. So we have to increase in this regard. In order to progress from contemplation phase, cons should decrease. Okay, so when you're trying to move people out of the pre-contemplation stage, you have to kind of share the pros of changing their behavior, or make them think about what would be the pros of changing your behavior. Once they're in the contemplation stage, you have to reduce the cons of changing. Okay. So in order to move from contemplation to action, then you're going to have more pros of changing than cons of changing. Okay, so this has to be more. So it has to be tilted like that, right? There has to be more weight to these things over here than over that. Then these are the ones that will support not changing your behavior in order to move to that action phase. Okay. All right, so you need 2 times increase in pros of changing relative to the decrease in cons of changing in order to move from one stage to another. Okay, 2 times increase in pros of changing relative to the decrease of changes in order to move from one stage up to another. Okay, so that was the decisional balance. It's another set of constructs that between the pros and the cons of engaging in the behavior. So the the textbook talked about tailoring, right? Interventions depending on the stage that the person finds themselves in. Okay, so you have to tailor the program, the intervention, to their specific stage. So according to the trans-theoretical model, the effectiveness and appropriateness of intervention techniques depends on the stage the person or the target population is in. So that's really important. We have to first measure and find where people are at. And in motivational interviewing, listed as MI here, that's a very important strategy, finding and meeting people where they currently are, right? This is where I currently am. I am thinking of my behavior change. I'm starting to make plans to change my behavior. I'm in preparation to start exercising. Okay, so then I would need appropriate intervention now that I'm at that stage. So you need to match the intervention strategies to the stages. That's what so when they're talking about tailored interventions, that means they're tailoring the intervention to the stage the person is in. Okay, so stage-matched interventions. They also talk about tailoring the intervention to the specific racial, ethnic, or subpopulation, right? So the way you would tailor to the specific stages might differ slightly for different racial, ethnic groups, right? What is engaging to somebody? How do you identify the pros of a certain behavior for people from different racial, ethnic groups? And the cons, right, of the behavior as well. Okay, so there's all sorts of cultural factors that can influence how we motivate someone to move across these stages. And that's important to consider, especially when you're considering each of the individual processes of change. So if you're trying to provide reinforcement for behavior change, what type of reinforcements would work for that specific racial ethnic group, right? Different cultures value different things. So are there universal motivators, reinforcements? Maybe, right? Maybe not. It depends. And so you do have to pay attention to your target population in that way. Okay. So finding out where the people are. And so there's staging instruments for alcohol, smoking, and a few other behaviors. And so we know we can easily access these instruments. They're readily available. You can do a Google search. Many of the federal organizations have clearinghouses of different types of assessment tools, and you might find something related to the trans-theoretical model or stages of change in relationship to especially the addictive behaviors. So we are trying to look at just a person's readiness to change. right? Are they ready or not? And if they're not ready, what do we need to do to help them get there? I think we have a handout on your on the module for this week that you might explore uh, to examine some of these instruments, I think. Okay, so now how do we integrate the stages and processes of change? And so the book talked about people being in the early stages, such as pre-contemplation and contemplation, requiring cognitive interventions or cognitive strategies to move them to later stages of change, right? Just because they're not even thinking about it. We need to kind of motivate some change by changing the way people are thinking about the behavior, right? So what are some things we can do with people in the pre-contemplation stage or in these early stages? And so they recommend engaging in consciousness raising, dramatic relief, environmental reevaluation, helping people become aware of these different strategies, or engaging different people in these strategies would be helpful in moving them toward later stages of change, okay? And so these are really important early on because it changes just the way people are thinking, what people know and think about the behavior. When a person is in the preparation stage, you sometimes self-liberation strategies might be effective. So like, okay, I'm thinking about changing my behavior. It's like you can help them plan a start date. It's like, okay, so there's a lot of PSAs that really try to target on this. They know people are in that stage, right? As the year is about to begin, many people are thinking about some behavior change. And so they capitalize on that. And so they'll do all sorts of PSAs on quitting smoking at the beginning of the year, or engaging in physical activity, or eating better for the new year, or whatever the case, right? So, how we engage or intervene at the different stages of change is important. In the later stages, where people are, in the early stages of action or in the maintenance stage, here it's like you're more likely to engage in behavioral strategies to keep them on track. So that contingency management, they start the behavior, okay, we're going to provide some kind of reward. So that's a behavior. Helping relationships, so it's like we engage people in social support. So hey, come exercise with me, or good job, right? It's like I provide positive feedback. Those are all behavioral type of actions, right? Counter conditioning, right? Engaging in behavioral substitutes to replace those unhealthy behaviors. That's a behavioral strategy as described here. Stimulus control, again, stimulus control is like taking action to remove unhealthy cues out of your environment and taking action to put healthy cues to promote that behavior change, those healthy lifestyle practices, right? Like putting your shoes and your clothes out. All that is behavioral strategies. So you can see how once the person is starting to engage in the behavior change, these behavioral strategies are more significant and effective than someone who's in the pre-contemplation state, okay? Don't bother leaving my shoes or my workout clothes. Don't put them out because I'm not going to exercise. Like it's a waste of time. I'm not going to exercise, right? It's like a person who's in that mindset doesn't need those behavioral type of strategies. They need the cognitive strategies to motivate them, right? Because what we believe, what we think is a big driver of what behaviors we engage in. Okay, so the book also talked about the precaution adoption process model. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Just know that there's more stages than there are in the trans-theoretical model, and they focus a lot on mental states rather than time. So instead of like, oh, over time, they're moving here, it's like, no, what's going on in the person's mind? And so it expands on the stages. So in addition to pre-contemplation, it includes the new stage of deciding not to act. And again, there's a large focus on the mental state for each stage. So you can see stage 1 is the person's unaware of the issue. Stage 2, they may be aware, but they're not engaged by the issue. Stage 3, they're undecided about acting. So you can see that they're moving toward that contemplation, but they're still not decided, maybe weighing the pros and cons. Stage 4 is like they simply decide not to act. Stage 5, they decide to act. Stage 6, they're acting. And stage 7, there's maintenance. Okay. And so here's the process in action for radon testing, which is a behavior, right? Do I want to conduct radon testing in my house? And then the other one is taking calcium in order to prevent osteoporosis. And so it walks you through the different stages of the precaution adoption process model. Okay. And that's all I have to say about that. All right. So that's it for the stages of change. I hope as you're conducting your readings that you are always starting first with the readings from the textbooks that you are assigned in this class. And then once you have some kind of solid basis on, knowledge, some basic knowledge on the theory, then you can move to the journal articles and see how they apply those theories. So that's just a recommendation for the order you should be reading for the week, the assigned readings for the week. Okay? All right, so I will post another video on the articles in a bit. Okay, thank you.